Hi, how's everyone doing? Sorry to keep y'all waiting. Anyways, I'll get right into it. Today I'm giving a presentation on the Google Salsa and NIST SSDF software supply chain frameworks. And we are going to together construct a roadmap on how to actually utilize these frameworks to create a complete best practices guide. So let's just hop right into it. First question is, why do we need new AppSec security frameworks? The answer is attackers are shifting priorities from production apps to software delivery pipelines and the developers of your applications. Software supply chain attacks are on the rise. I don't think I need to explain SolarWinds to anyone who came to this talk, nor CodeCov, the Kaseya attack, or Xcode Spy. But there's been plenty of other attacks, and they're certainly increasing in frequency. By 2025, Gartner predicts that 45% of organizations worldwide will have experienced attacks on their software supply chains, which is a threefold increase from last year. The first framework that we are going to get into is the NIST SSDF. Now, the NIST SSDF is a recently announced framework that pulls a lot of inspiration from OWASP's SAM, and it also lists Gartner, the White House, and the Department of Defense as general resources. The reason why this framework was actually created was in results of a presidential executive order from midway last year. This order was announced in response to the Colonial Pipeline attack and was specifically designed to harden actual infrastructure. But since its announcement, it has been extended to cover other particular aspects, particularly software supply chain security. The development of commercial software often lacks transparency, sufficient focus on the ability of software to resist attack, and adequate controls to prevent tampering by malicious actors. Ultimately, applications just don't have the visibility into what they actually have within them. And of course, anti-security thrives in a world where there is no visibility. The NIST executive order has been following this timeline. We've since seen an actual IOC framework announced in direct response to this. We've seen additional guidelines surrounding the specific aspects which this framework covers. And since its announcement, we've actually seen a final version of the NIST SSDF announced, v1.1. And critical software, as defined by NIST, includes software that is created and maintained by federal organizations, federal agencies, and other critical infrastructure. This can include healthcare, this can include electricity, this can include water resources. NIST is to publish security measure guidance by July 11th. They'll be consulting with the Office of Management and Budget, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and these guidelines will help outline security measures for critical software. The NIST SSCS directs organizations to utilize the secure software development framework as defined here. I'm going to skip over some of this for sake of time because ultimately this is extraneous. But I know a lot of people in here are probably interested in IoT. Part of the NIST SSDF actually covers Internet of Things and other potential accessories that could have access to critical infrastructure. Ultimately, one of the main takeaways from this SSDF is the 5 objectives, which include protecting the executive order critical software from unauthorized access and usage, protecting the confidentiality and availability of the data used within these resources, identifying the exact dependencies used within this software. We've heard the term SBOM used quite a lot recently, especially in the world of AppSec. And ultimately, the goal of that is just to produce a software bill of materials that enumerates all of your dependencies. You can't really secure what you aren't aware you have. And I've probably thrown this statistic out to a few of you that I've talked to, but 70 to 80% of all breaches that occur are caused by a known vulnerability that has gone unpatched, which To rephrase means that 70 to 80% of all breaches could have been prevented by individuals keeping their dependencies updated. Objective 4 includes rapid response, which involves quickly detecting, responding to, and recovering from threats and incidents. A lot of that just goes back to basic planning. And Objective 5 is training, which is ensuring that the most important part of your organization, which is the people involved in it, understand the priorities in terms of security that your organization has. An additional thing that the SSDF produces is a risk severity schema. You can read through most of this on your own time. I think the slides are available. But one of the keys is that anything above significant risk has mandatory reporting required, which is designed to help prevent vulnerabilities from going unchecked, because as we've seen with incidents such as Log4j, if one organization is affected by a dependency breach, chances are others might be affected similarly. And we can skip over that. So the key practices of the NIST SSDF come down to preparing the organization, protecting the software of your organization, producing well-secured software that has undergone vetting and other checks, and responding to vulnerabilities in a sufficient amount of time. You don't want to waste time responding to vulnerabilities. I don't think I need to explain that one. Moving on to the Google Salsa. The Google Salsa framework was released early last year, and it was created as a sequel to Binary Authorization for Borg, which is a bit of a ridiculous name, but it's Google's internal standard that they've been using for quite a while. And I should probably update this. Salsa has moved away from using Google, and they've moved towards using OpenSSF, which is an organization that their main purpose is helping secure open source software. Moving on, though. Google Salsa entails different levels, and these different levels correspond to different rigor of cybersecurity. Google Salsa Level 1 is pretty much no guarantees. There really isn't any guarantee of source or build security. Level 1, though, entails the build process being fully scripted and able to generate provenance. Salsa Level 2 requires using version control and hosted build services that generate authenticated provenance. This helps mitigate some risks inherent to human tampering or potentially malicious behaviors. Salsa Level 3 entails the source and build platforms meeting specific standards to guarantee the availability of the source and the integrity of the provenance, respectively. And Salsa Level 4 is the highest rigor of cybersecurity, according to the Salsa framework. This requires two-person review of all changes and a hermetic, reproducible build process, which is another way of saying you need to have oversight over all changes that go into your code base, and you need to make sure that your build isn't dependent on humans inputting anything that could possibly result in error later. I find that this is a pretty good model for demonstrating the different places that vulnerabilities can enter into your source, build, package, and use. And it should be noted that this chain exists within all dependencies as well, recursively. There are 5 categories of Salsa requirements: build, source, provenance, provenance content, and common requirements. First is source requirements. This entails the application being version controlled, having verified history, being retained indefinitely, or at least for a certain period of time, and two-person reviewed. It's over there, by the way. Let's see, in terms of build, this entails having a scripted build that is reproducible, able to be created ephemerally and also isolated so that it doesn't affect other environments and so that other environments don't affect it. This, for example, could entail creating a build test environment, a build source environment, a build production environment. Ultimately, you want to be able to separate out your different environments. And you also want it to be reproducible, because chances are if your application isn't, or your build is not reproducible, certain errors can be introduced. It should be noted that this is not a Salsa requirement, though. I don't think I need to explain all of this. Let's move on directly to the key learnings of the NIST SSDF and Google Salsa. The SSDF focuses more on what, whereas Salsa focuses on how. A way I like to articulate this is that SSDF is much more descriptive of the security practices, whereas Salsa is much more prescriptive of what you should do to secure your software. And as such, they are complementary frameworks. They also both have concepts of tiers versus levels, with higher levels and tiers corresponding to higher guarantees of security. NIST recommends a review for hard-coded secrets. Let's see, both of them require utilizing enforcing security policy consistently. In other words, having strong governance of your security policy. They also suggest to detect and remediate misconfigurations as they're occurring. For example, configuration drift for those of you who use Terraform in your environments. And additionally, reducing code tampering risk, which entails requiring a two-person review using hermetic builds and utilizing code signing. Even as complementary frameworks, though, these two frameworks don't cover everything, and there are some gaps. Some gaps include identifying suspicious behavior in code leaks. For example, a developer just put in their 2 weeks notice a couple weeks ago. Suddenly, they're cloning a lot of repositories. Chances are you'd probably want to notice that, or at least flag it. Doesn't necessarily imply guilt, but it could. Additionally, you want to slow down attackers with each layer of protection. This comes back to least privileged access. Additionally, you want to perform anomaly detection, which helps prevent any sort of anomalies from going undetected, as I described before. And this usually comes from multiple different sources. The main way that you can actually perform anomaly detection effectively is by comparing data from multiple sources in your software development lifecycle, as this helps prevent potential tampering from slipping through. I have a description of all of these frameworks and more in pretty explicit detail on SciCode's website. Yeah, and this page should be live now. Let me know if it doesn't work. And yeah, sorry I had to rush that a little bit, but yeah, we should have like a minute or two for Q&A if anyone has any questions. I agree. Salsa.dev is actually on the resources page as well. Should be the last link under the Salsa section.
Do we have any questions for Tony? We have like 30 seconds. Oh, there's a question over there.
Shout him out. So NIST technically, because its cybersecurity framework came first. Salsa is still very new. It's actually still in active development. Certain refinements still need to be made, of course, particularly with regards to what does provenance look like. Some say that could actually be what SBOMs end up becoming, but from what I've read on Salsa's site, there's a vision of potentially just integrating with an application or a build system and running a scan to determine the configurations and generating a Salsa provenance certificate from that. Again, not entirely sure how that'll work, but that is on the roadmap as I understand it.
All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you, Tony, for presenting at BSidesSF.
Thanks for having me.